U.S. debt has recently gone as high as $35.32 trillion and
Right.
rising according to the U.S. Treasury. I can't even fathom this number. How do we get out of this situation? This debt is on the back of every American. Can the government even repay the debt at this point? And what happens if we default? And what's the hard truth?
Well, when I was first put into office at the Office of Federal Student Aid, I come from the business world, and I'm used to seeing things on balance sheets rounded to millions. And I never will forget them giving me one of my first briefing, and I saw 330, and I said, well, okay, $330 million. They said, Wayne, we need to correct you. That's $330 billion. You know, so to put it in perspective, a million is 1,000 thousands is a million, 1,000 millions is a billion, 1,000 billions is a trillion. So if you were to look at this, I think if I looked at it one time, $1 trillion is equal to, if every second was $1, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 240 years or something like that. But it's a boatload of money. So when I was there with the Trump administration, the national debt was just a shade under 20 trillion. I was the custodian of 1.6 trillion of that, which had already been borrowed by the federal government and deployed to the schools. And I thought that was just an astounding number, and it did take me a while to get my mind around it. We're at 35 trillion. Now, to put this in perspective, in the 4 years that Biden and Harris have been in office, they have doubled the national debt. So it took us 200 and something years to get to one level, and they doubled that inside of 4 years. Now, when we hit 50 trillion, we're in real trouble in terms of being able to service that debt. At 75 trillion, we're pretty close to being, we're just close to being, let's say, totally unable to service it. And 100 trillion, we're toast. We're toast. I would probably argue that we're probably close to being toast at 60 trillion. Now, I was in Argentina. I was running a bank in Argentina when the government, on a Tuesday, the peso was equal to $1, and you could use dollars and you could use pesos. On Wednesday, the government defaulted on its bonds, and the whole world melted down. And no matter if you had $1 million in the bank or whatever you had, the most that the government would let you take out was $500 in a week. People were selling their family heirlooms in order just to have enough cash to go to the grocery store. There were price controls being put on things in the grocery store, and bottom line is nobody was manufacturing because the price, they couldn't manufacture within the price control limits. We had little old ladies, literally little old ladies, your grandmother. I was on one corner. There was my bank, there was another bank, there's Citibank, and another. People just like your grandparents were literally breaking the windows out of the bank, taking the furniture in the middle of the street and setting it on fire. Mm-hmm. We had the pots and pans, and the police were very respectful. They were watching all this, but not interrupting. I saw an armored car, stop in front of a bank, and the people turned over the armored car. I had a lady come into my bank with a knife to her throat, and she said she was going to cut her cut her throat if we didn't give her money out of her account. You cannot imagine the chaos that will occur in the United States of America if we default on our debt. Now, here's another interesting fact. Guess who owns our debt?
The U.S. citizens?
China. China is the major bondholder for all the debt, majority of the debt of the United States. So let me tell you a little quick story. Peru also defaulted on its debt many years ago, and the president of Peru flew the Peruvian Air Force One to Southern California, and basically it got confiscated because the bondholder said this is an asset of the country, and all the assets of the country are pledged against that. So they confiscated the airplane. Let me tell you how bizarre defaulting on the national debt can really be. If China is a bondholder and we default on the national debt, and we have pledged the assets of the United States against that debt, they could foreclose on one of our aircraft carriers. under international law. So we're talking about some really heavy duty stuff. Now, an aircraft carrier would probably defend itself if they were going to try and foreclose on it. But from an asset, standpoint, it is one of the assets that's backing up the full faith and credit of the United States.
And can we repay the debt? Is it possible?
Yes, we can, because what you need to look at, there's a ratio that's called the national debt to GDP ratio. And it's an important ratio because let's say that the national debt is 35 trillion and the GDP is 35 trillion. That's basically an indicator that through forms of that's called revenue access, i.e. taxation, we could literally get enough money. The question, there's two important questions. Can we pay enough to service the debt? And the answer is we could pay on that interest for a long period of time, probably up to about, I'd say up to about 60 or 70 trillion. The question is, can we ever repay the principal of that debt? And the answer is yes. But we've got to raise GDP productivity, and we got to stop doing deficit spending. The biggest fear I have with the Democrats when they come into office, if they come into office again, is they will continue this freewheeling spending, which is basically putting so much cash in the system, and that cash is coming from borrowings, that it will continue to raise prices, and quite frankly, they're just going to keep that the Ferris wheel running around to quite frankly buy votes. Chavez did the same identical thing when he came to power in Venezuela. He literally promised everybody a chicken if they would vote for him, and they did. And then he basically sold off the chicken farm and took over the oil companies. So, can we do it? Yeah, but it's going to take a lot of hard-nosed actions by the leader of our country, and in this case President Trump, and members like me in the Congress to actually do it. Sanford Bishop, he doesn't care. He won't ever do it.
Are they raising the debt on purpose by chance?
No, they're not raising the debt on purpose. They're putting out money on purpose. It just so happens that in order to put money out, they got to raise the debt because they can only do it by borrowing because there's not enough money coming in through taxation.